I'm Will Aubrey. Time for another edition of the Improbability Engine. I'm joined by my buddy Joe Darnell. And Joe, as always, we start with our moment of what? And give me yours.
Okay, my moment of what comes from the Ohio Valley Conference basketball tournament. And a surprising team is going to represent the OVC in the NCAA tournament, and it's Jacksonville State. For the first time ever, they're going to the NCAA tournament. Pretty impressive job there by Ray Harper in his first year coming over from Western Kentucky after being unceremoniously dumped by the Hilltoppers. He manages to take a mediocre team to the NCAA tournament, which is kind of his track record. So pretty impressive, pretty surprising. I saw it, I was like, what? So there you go.
All right. Mine comes from the NFL Combine.
Oh, good times.
Tori Petrie, who is a reporter for the Detroit Lions website, ran the 40-yard dash in high heels in 5.98 seconds. Think about that. Now, 5.98 wouldn't be good if you were a running back in the NFL, but it's pretty darn fast. I ran it in 5.1 when I was 40. I probably would run it in about 8 today. 5.98 in heels, I think that's incredible.
Well, I ran in high school. I ran between 4.6 and 4.7 in the 40, which is not great. You start in the morning on the 6th of April, and then you end somewhere time in the afternoon on the 7th of April, and you get to that point where they don't call you fast at that point. So yeah, that's pretty impressive and a good job. There was a lot of speed on display in the combine too, not just in heels. Young man actually could have won an island from Adidas. He ran a 4.22.40, which is the fastest ever at the combine, but he was wearing the wrong shoes.
Oops.
Yeah. I think it worked out pretty well because Nike signed him to a shoe deal right afterwards. So as it goes, that's all right. That'll work out pretty well.
Well, time to talk about our Murray State Racers, and their season may or may not be over as they lost in the Ohio Valley Conference tournament. But chance is still there that they could be invited to play in the CIT or the CBI tournament.
Right.
Those tournaments have taken teams with losing records in the past. The CIT took Chicago State in 2013. They had an 11-21 record.
Right.
And then just a couple of years ago, the CBI took 3 teams with losing records. So the chance is there, especially when you consider the star power of guys like Jonathan Stark and Terrell Miller. I think that would make Murray State appealing. And I have to think that if the Racers want to be invited, they'll get an invitation to one of those tournaments.
I think the biggest thing that plays into that as well is the history of support from Racer fans. During the CIT tournament, that magical run that team went on, by far the best turnout was at Murray State for those games. I mean, really good, solid, loud fan participation, and that actually plays into it, I think. But I think you're right. I hope they're not done. They're a young team. They need to play. They need to practice. They need to be together. And any time that you can get any kind of experience in postseason play, it's valuable. It just is. It's extremely valuable. So I hope they're not done. I'd like to see them play again. They're a fun team to watch. I think they were just starting to come together. I think they ran out of gas against a pretty good UT Martin team that really just had their number that night. And not much you can do about that. That's why you want to play better during the regular season, so you don't have to win 4 games in 4 nights to make it to the NCAA tournament.
By and large, the Racer fans that I've talked to or seen comments online from all seem to be in favor of playing if they're invited.
Yeah, and it's it could be a very positive situation, one that I hope comes to fruition. Just to give these guys a little more practice time. I mean, it's one of those where it's not easy in the manner the NCAA sets forth to progress and get better as a team because there's only so many hours a day that you can practice. There's so many practices you can do a week. There's only so much you can do. So you're really pressed for time. The teams that have success and play in the tournaments in the postseason generally can carry that over and use that success, parlay that into something really positive. So I'm hoping that the Racers can do that as well.
I don't know whether they want to. That's what it will come down to, is whether or not they want to.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. One of the things that I wanted to talk about in this one when we're talking about the Racers is talking about the direction of the conference in general. I recently got into a discussion with a news reporter out of Birmingham, Tom Anino. Used to work at WPSD. Actually, a really good guy. He's a good guy. Very, very astute in his recognition and understanding of what Murray State is, and also gives an outsider's perspective, which is valuable at times. He was talking about it and we were discussing possible changes to how the conference goes about its business. Now that started with how do we get the number one seed into the NCAA tournament? Not always the best case for the Racers, but generally the best case for the conference is to have your best team make the tournament. My argument was that the focus of the conference on having a televised tournament final on ESPN is detrimental. And the reason being is it puts pressure on teams, and it makes it where you don't. First, you play a week before the NCAA tournament selection show. That's the last game that an OVC champion plays, is a week before the NCAA tournament begins. So that's a week of being off, whereas other teams are 2 days, 3 days. They're only going to sit a couple days and they'll be ready to go. That's not the case in the OVC, and the only reason you do that is because of ESPN broadcasting the game.
I don't know that that's detrimental, though.
I don't think it's good.
You can look at the OVC's history in the NCAA tournament and point to numerous victories up until the last couple of years that the league had, and they did quite well over a stretch of about 5 years.
Right, and now here's the other part that I would look at. As it comes to those wins, if it was beneficial, do you not think that the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, Pac-12, whomever, that they would move their conference tournaments up so that they would have it too?
No, because they're driven by money.
But the OVC isn't?
The OVC doesn't have the option if they want to get the publicity. And so the OVC says, okay, well, we can't have our game on the big weekend, so we'll do it the previous weekend.
Right. So the question then remains, if it's better for teams to...
Oh, I don't think it's better or worse. I think it's a push.
I don't think it is. I think I've seen enough of teams coming out rusty, coming out flat, coming out unable to make that push. The biggest thing that's happened is I think the wins that the conference has had, namely Murray State's wins, have come whenever you're dealing with a team that was also rusty in Vanderbilt, or in a matchup where Murray State was the higher seed and absolutely the better team against Colorado State.
Well, what about Moorhead?
Moorhead's they got a play-in game against a weak opponent first. Do you know what I'm saying? Now that wasn't... Well,
they were still off 10 days.
Yeah, but they got to open against a team from the SWAC or whatever,
okay,
as opposed to opening with Louisville or opening with, Marquette or something of that nature.
Did Eastern Kentucky get a win in that stretch?
They did not. No.
Okay.
They lost in their matchup. Now, they played pretty well, but they still lost. And that was a pretty good team that Eastern Kentucky had.
See, I don't think that the OVC should worry about that, nor do I think that they should fret over whether the top seed wins the tournament. Let's let happen whatever happens.
Right.
I think they should be concerned about making things fair for everybody, and I believe the move to Evansville will do that, or in some manner, make things fairer than what they were with having a tournament in Nashville.
Right. Now, so what I look at with with the conference and thinking about what the plan is for the conference going forward, my thought is the revenue basis for the conference. You got two of them. You've got television revenue, and you've got the conference tournament itself.
Right.
Those are the two that are they're easiest. They're the ones you can control to an extent. The problem is TV revenue has been pretty steady, but it's not going to be steady. ESPN is still laying people off. I really think that they're going to stop. They're going to do away with sending people to games. They're not going to broadcast very many games. They're going to cut back to some sustainable, profitable level, and I don't know if that includes OVC basketball games.
Well, as it stands now, ESPN gets $7 from every cable TV subscription or satellite TV subscription that someone has ESPN as a part of.
Right.
$7 from you, $7 from me.
Right.
And that's $7 a month. Now, the problem with that is people are cutting cords. More and more people are dropping cable and satellite TV plans. And so that's costing them money. Now, yes, they've laid off a bunch of people. How far it goes and whether it will cut into programming, I don't know. But it could. And if it does, then that could certainly hurt the OVC.
So the other area that the conference has is the conference tournament. I think they've addressed the most glaring issue by moving it out of Nashville into Evansville. It's a much nicer venue. It's geographically more equitable. And honestly, I would bet that Evansville gave the league a pretty good deal to go up to the Ford Center. I would bet that because Evansville wanted it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big deal for Evansville. Losing the OVC tournament is not a big deal to Nashville.
No, they don't care.
They don't care. It absolutely is not even.
It gets no coverage in Nashville.
20 years ago, it was a bigger deal. Nashville was smaller. It was trying to build their national brand, but right now Nashville's booming. They don't need the OVC. They've got the SEC women. They've got the SEC men. They've got the NCAA women's tournament. They've got the NCAA men's tournament. They don't look at the OVC tournament and say, oh, that's one we got to have. Evansville, completely different. They want to be on that list. They want to compete with the Daytons, the ones that get the first 4 games. Now, the only way you're going to do that is by hosting. Being a host, doing it well, doing it at a high level. They've done that at, I believe, the Division II level, hosting national championship games, the Division II level at the Ford Center, which anybody who's been at the Ford Center understands. That's a beautiful place. I mean,
it is. It's a great, it's a tremendous facility, and Evansville's a great place to visit.
Right, it is. It's a pretty town. I mean, it's not too big. There's plenty of stuff to do and see, but really a nice town.
There's a lot to do there. I love the bicycle trail that goes along the Ohio River. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And we've gone up there for roller derby, and we've gone up there. You should do that sometime. Get the suicide seating. And
is there a discount for the suicide seating?
No.
Oh,
you
that's
sit on
terrible.
you sit on the floor next to the track. It's pretty cool.
No, so we look at those two different areas. We can say that the television money could be weaker than what we've ever had in our lives, but the tournament is solid, right? So the one big area that the conference has to do better on, officiating.
Now, I think membership is something that has to be considered as well.
Yeah.
I think taking Belmont was a huge mistake. You can't kick them out once you've taken them.
Right.
So what are you going to do? And you can't really make them play football.
Right.
But they have a tremendous financial advantage over the other schools in the league because they don't play football. They get to pay their head coach like 3 times what other head basketball coaches make, and it gives them an edge in other sports like women's basketball and various other sports as well. So I don't know what you do about that, but if they look to bring in another school at some point, if there's a defection, say Tennessee State or Jacksonville
State is that team now. The one thing that held back Jacksonville State from moving was their absolute mediocrity at best in men's basketball. They've got a good baseball team. They've got a good football team. They've got support for all of those programs. Their basketball team was bad, was just plain bad. This trip to the dance might be just what's needed to open up the Sun Belt and say, oh, yeah, no, we can add Jacksonville State. That fits in our footprint for a D1
They'll be a
school.
16 seed. They'll probably get one of the first 4 games in Dayton. They could get a win.
You know, I don't know, man. They beat Tulsa. They might end up being a 16, but without the play-in, which is the absolute worst spot
Yes, that's
to
the
be.
worst spot to be in.
Because then you don't even get a share if you win a game. I mean, I could see them being one of the 16s that don't get a play-in game, and that's gonna suck. As an OVC fan, I am hopeful that they get that play-in game. I am begging.
And
for it.
by the way,
Yeah.
don't call it a play-in game. It's not a play-in game.
It's a play-in game.
It's part of the tournament.
It's a
you
pig.
you get a share if you win one of those games. It's not a play-in game.
It's a play-in
It's
game.
the first 4. It's the first 4. And don't
That's
say
terrible.
concerning as an adjective either. It's a preposition.
Well, fine. It's a preposition. So the biggest issue that's left on the table for the OVC is they've got to improve their officiating. It absolutely does a disservice to the teams in this conference to have the officials night in, night out that they have. And the problem is they're not willing to pay more money. They're not willing to try to do that. They don't hold officials who are really poor at their jobs. They don't hold them accountable and not give them more jobs. They keep hiring the same inept, inadequate, poor officials.
Do you really think the officiating's that bad?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. And it's I've tested that concept by watching other teams besides Murray State because I want to try to take my inherent biases out of it.
Right.
And there's just some really, and it's not all the time, but man, it's just so different watching OVC teams play and their officiating versus teams that are even in Conference USA or the SoCon or some of those other ones that have some bigger overlaps.
I'll say this. I sit on press row at the CFSB Center for Murray State home
Yeah.
games. And we are down at one end.
Right.
Okay? So I don't have a good view of the other end.
Yeah.
And I can't see well enough to dispute any call at the other end.
Right.
But I'll say this. At the end where I'm sitting, 90% of the time when the fans go crazy about a call, they're wrong and the official's right.
And I can appreciate that. The problem is it should be higher than that.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, and this is not just in the OVC. Other conferences are having trouble with this. It seems as though the officiating is not keeping pace with the game. But there were times in the past, 20 years that we've had referees that cross over from the SEC or from the ACC or from the Big Ten even at times, and you get a different game. You get something that's completely different. The play is different. The speed is different. How the game is done. The biggest exposition of that is the game in the NIT versus Tulsa. That game, if it had been with OVC refs, it would have been a completely different basketball game. And now, mind you, some of that stuff hurt Murray State. There were a couple contested jumpers that there was contacted in the OVC. That's whistle. Just automatically, there's a whistle. And they weren't. And they probably shouldn't be because it was really light contact. It didn't interfere with the play, and it wasn't one of those that you go, well, that was egregious. But what it did is they'd allowed those teams to play physical down low. And in that game in particular, with Jarvis and John, we had the ability to play physical with a team from a bigger conference. Now, that doesn't always happen, but we were able to do that. Now, if it's an OVC game, our two best post players probably foul out in the third, what would be the third quarter of the game, early in the second half, because you can't do that in the OVC. You can't be the type of player that you need to be in the NCAA tournament during the OVC season.
Moving right along.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the Murray High Lady Tigers.
Okay.
And we usually talk about Callaway Sports, and we'll do that here in a minute.
Rightly so, yes.
We'll do that here in a minute. They won their first round game in the Sweet 16, 70-31 over Nelson County. Now, people who have followed them all year, they might say, well, 70-31, that's not surprising. They've beaten a lot of teams like that.
Yeah.
Nelson County was 30-3.
Yeah.
Nelson,
25th in the state at the time.
Nelson County was a 12-point underdog to Murray, and they lost by 39. Okay, it was supposed to be a close game. The job that Rochelle Turner has done coaching that team this year is incredible. Those kids have put together an incredible season, and they play Louisville Butler on Friday.
Number one team in the state.
The number one team in the state.
And not close, might I add. They're a really good team. Butler's a good team, man. Oh,
they're an outstanding team, and they could well beat Murray.
They could, yeah.
Okay, everybody expects them to beat Murray.
Yeah.
But I'll say this: don't count Murray out of that game.
Oh,
and
of course not.
And if they win that, they could go all the way.
Well, the big thing that you've got to see with Murray that doesn't happen to a lot of high school teams, and it certainly doesn't happen to a lot of Region 1 teams, they've got a great mix of players. They've got size, skilled size down low. They've got guards who can play. And you've watched them when they've played against the Lakers. They're just really tough to pin down. It's hard to say, well, if you do this, you can beat them. You really can't do that, especially with a healthy Maddie Waldrop. It just makes it that much harder.
Absolutely. And, you know, they've got an inside-outside attack. They can score inside. They can shoot threes. They've got a good mid-range game, and that's something that's almost unheard of in this day and age. They're just a phenomenal team, and I'll be pulling for them on Friday when they play Butler. I do want to also mention, I think Rochelle would be a great person for Murray State to choose to take over their women's program.
Well, the only thing that I would say to that is, while I have absolutely no doubt that she could do the job, there's a big jump from going, a single-A high school basketball coach to a Division I college basketball coach. I think X's and O's wise, not a big jump at all. She can handle that. I think the biggest thing she would need to do is bring in people who could help her to run a D1 program, people with some experience doing it. Whoever it is, if you're looking to hire a high school coach to D1, you've got to be very intelligent with your assistant coaches.
Now, there are numerous schools that have done it and have been very successful. UT Martin is a great example.
Absolutely.
They did it, and Kevin McMillan has been very successful.
Southeastern Louisiana is one that says that didn't do it, that wasn't successful, but quite honestly, I think it's a completely different situation.
Oklahoma did it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they were successful.
I firmly believe that at the coaching level, I think that women's basketball, I don't want to sound condescending with this because that's not what I'm not intending this at all. I think it's 20 years, it's where men's basketball was 25, 30 years ago. I don't think it's sorted out who all the good coaches are yet. I think there are great coaches in college basketball now, but there are so many really good coaches, young, upcoming coaches in the high school and junior college ranks on the women's side that are they have not been brought up. Now, in men's basketball, that may be true as well, but those coaches tend to move up pretty quick. Whereas in women, it doesn't seem like they have that rapid ascension. I think there's a lot of talent in women's coaching ranks that is still untapped, whether it be at the high school level or the small college level, so on and so forth. I think there's a lot of really good coaches down at that level too.
Well,
so.
I think that's undoubtedly true. One of the reasons for that is that, and I'm not even sure whether I should get into this or not. I'm not going to comment on it other than to just give the fact, and then if you think we should expound on it, we will. 35 years ago, the vast majority of women's college basketball coaches were women, but there was no money in the sport. Once money got into the sport, men started getting those jobs, and now more than half of the women's college basketball coaches are men. And as I said,
I can understand that. I mean, that's a logical reason, and it explains a lot of that. I think that's a very powerful theory and one that has merit. I mean, no two ways about it. Bringing it back to the point we were trying to make, I think Rochelle's done a fantastic job. She's a fantastic coach. it's funny to me to see college coaches, because it doesn't matter what you coach in college. You tend to fall into a certain subtype, personality subtype. I always think of Denny Crum.
Cool Hand Luke.
Denny Crum looked like he was watching someone buy groceries. It didn't matter what he was coaching. It didn't matter what was going on. He was watching the checkout person scan his groceries. It could have been the Final Four, the Sweet 16, the conference championship against Kentucky. It didn't matter. He was, he just was that kind of guy. And then you look at guys like Raleigh Massimino, which is one of my favorite coaches of all time. Raleigh looked like he was being electrocuted. It's a warm-up line, Raleigh. They're not doing anything yet. Why do you look so disheveled? Why are you so upset? Why are you screaming and angry and just, pulling his hair? Coaches are fun to watch. And I really like the way Rochelle Turner is on the sideline, because she plays both sides of that. She can look absolutely nonplussed at any given point. And in the next minute, up and passionate and teaching and coaching and yelling and trying to drive home a point. And then at the end, she'll give you a hug.
But if you've ever sat close enough to her bench, there are people who don't sit close and they don't really hear what she says. Mainly what she yells is encouragement.
Oh, yeah.
She does not berate her players.
No.
It's encouragement.
Exactly. She's not a Bobby Knight.
Now, let me give you a little story about Denny Crum. He had a reputation as Cool Hand Luke, and he didn't yell and scream. But he had subtle ways that he could deal with his players. There was once when Rodney McCray hadn't been playing well, and so Denny had made out a chart showing how many minutes people were going to play in the next game, and he had Rodney at 18 minutes. And Rodney said, "Where are my minutes? Why do you have me at 18? You haven't been playing well enough. You need to play better." And he didn't have to yell or anything. Just that little diagram that he showed Rodney was enough to make Rodney go out and play his behind off in the next game. I do want to, before we finish the sports section, talk about the Lakers. The Callaway boys played their first-round game last week. I think it was Wednesday, against Paducah Tillman in the Region 1 boys basketball
tournament. A game
tournament.
that we had kind of called was a really tough matchup.
It was. They got off to an 8-0 lead over Tillman, but Tillman fought back, and Callaway wound up losing, I believe, by 8 points. But the boys had a terrific year. I think Coach Birdsong did a great job, and I was just really proud of the whole team and how they played this year.
Absolutely, and you could tell the respect was there from everyone else as well. You're talking about. I know that one player for the Lakers made the all-tournament team in one game. To make the all-tournament team tells you how good you played in that game and how impactful you were to that game. Also, another player received a different award. But the thing that's really telling to me is that how hard they fought every second of that game, and that's where a team gets my respect. How hard you play, because they could have folded at any given point.
Now, and this could have made our moment of what? Yeah. Did you see the scores in the regional semifinals?
Yeah, I couldn't. I can't. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I think this is one of those where you have teams that, I'm not going to say they quit, but the level of intensity leveled off once they got to a certain point, and it gets bad from there. Mentally, teams you've got to be tough. You've got to be tough. You've got to be mentally tough enough to look at a deficit and say, all right, how do we come back from 10 points down, 12 points down? How do we do that? Some teams can't do that. Some teams don't do that. Some teams are younger and have trouble understanding what they need to do. They try to find a 12-point shot, and there just aren't any. The way you come back from a deficit is you hit your shots and force them to miss theirs. That's the only way to do it, because there are no 12-point shots. So
games,
a lot of uneven effort, I thought. It
was just bizarre,
right?
Because both regional semifinals were blowouts.
And the regional final was fantastic.
Yeah, so Anyway, that brings to a close this edition of the Improbability Engine.